Here from Conservative MP Bob Seeley, who's a member of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee in the House of Commons, because, Bob, you wrote a piece yesterday in which you described the weakness of the West and how this should have been something that we could see coming. I mean, it seems extraordinary, doesn't it, that Israel, who I've always thought of as the most secure country probably in the entire world, and the United States as well, didn't see this coming, because you pointed out it was clearly in the planning for a long time.
It is difficult to see these things when they come, and then everyone afterwards says, "Well, why didn't you see it?" So we should give the Israelis occasionally their security or their intelligence occasionally fails them, and as in 1973, it's failed them over this weekend. So it's a very significant moment for them, and they're obviously going to have a look at why they failed and why they didn't see what was coming, and all the sort of various deception operations which were being managed against them by Hamas. Yes. But I mean, looking forward, I think there's a lot of what Alexandra said was correct. And I do think that we are seeing the dividing lines in, sadly, an increasingly global conflict. You have Russia and Iran, very close relationship, needing each other's arms and expertise. North Korea as well, and potentially China. Let's see what happens with China.
I mean, I've seen analysis this weekend in which it's been said that this is a further kind of pointer, if you like, to the lack of power from the United States. The United States is sort of seen internationally, at least, as in decline when it comes to being able to police the world. Joe Biden's being very, very heavily criticised for giving this $6 billion to the Iranians because of the sanction problem. And America's in a kind of difficult position here as well, right?
Yeah, America still has a vast amount of power. I think it's almost the desire to withdraw from the Middle East and not be so focused. And because they're now self-sufficient in energy, because they chose to frack 10 or 15 years ago, they now have less diplomatic need to be quite as closely engaged as they were before. And the problem with that is that the Europeans and the Brits don't have the power to do it themselves. And you then have China that steps in and starts to develop much closer relations, including with Israel. And one of the slight problems has been for both Israel and the US is that their relationship has not been as strong as it should have been in recent years, because there's a difference between what the Biden administration wants to see from Israel and what Netanyahu wants to see from Israel.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm looking at a piece today written about the chief, Hamas chief, who sits in an office in Qatar, who was seen sort of gloating over the attack and celebrating. His name's Ismail Haniyeh. He's obviously, you know, being protected, if you like, by Qatar, in the same way that the Taliban's only official office is in that part of the Middle East as well. You know, it's an incredible kind of complex view of the world that you have to take when you look at Saudi Arabia, where you look at Qatar, they don't get along. You look at Iran, who do get along with Qatar. I mean, how do we find a way through this? Because it seems to me that the peace deal that everybody talks about is a simply impossible one to make.
I'm not so okay. I'll put an alternative argument, Mike. The reason why this is taking place now is because there was an effective normalization of relationships between Israel on one side and between a lot of Sunni states on the other. So Israel has its normalization of relationships with Morocco, it's got its normalization of relationships with the UAE, and it's got a trade now with the UAE, which is worth about $2.5 billion a year. And it is beginning to normalize, or has gone a significant way to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia. This is happening today. There are some internal reasons in Israel, and there have been some bad things, certainly true, which have happened to Palestinians at the hands of Israeli settlers in the West Bank. And one should not ignore that. And a number of Palestinians have died this year. But the overriding reason this is happening now is because Iran wants to put a stop to the normalization of Israel as just another Middle Eastern state. And the problem is that when Israel is very obviously now killing Palestinians, i.e. killing Muslims, in order to secure its borders, in order to get those militants or terrorists, however you want to describe them, out of that country, that means that it becomes much more difficult for Saudi Arabia to normalize that relationship. So this is why this is happening. It's happening because there was a move to the normalization of relationships between some Sunni Arab countries and Sunni Muslim countries and Israel. So that's why this is happening. It's happening to put a block to all the good things that were happening in the Middle East, notwithstanding continued problems between Israel and the Palestinians in the West Bank and elsewhere.